My name is Marcy Timmerman. I am the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Kentucky. And I have with me, Doctor, would you like to introduce yourself? Sorry.
Yes, my name is Dr. Rachel Buehner. I'm the former president of the Kentucky Psychological Association, currently a member of the Kentucky Psychological Foundation's Board of Directors.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here with us today. This is a joint effort between KPF, the Psychological Foundation, and us in trying to help answer some questions that we know are burning questions from parents and folks who are working with kids. So not just parents, right? A lot of folks actually. So the title of this event is Your Child More Anxious These Days? Let's talk about it. I think it's a great title because it's true, and we're just going to talk about it here. Just to give a little background, the Mental Health America of Kentucky, we have been here since 1951. We are in the business of public education and advocacy. And I know the Psychological Foundation has a similar effort. Dr. Buehner, do you want to talk briefly about what you guys do?
Sure. So the Psychological Foundation, we are sort of the public education arm of the Kentucky Psychological Association. So we do initiatives meant to help educate the public, bring awareness to certain mental health issues, and kind of direct people toward resources that can help them or their families.
Awesome. Yeah, I love you guys' work. So appreciate having you all here in this partnership. It's really
Back
great.
at you, Marcy. Back at you.
We work well together in these spaces. For those who are not familiar with the role of psychologist, it is a PhD, typically a program with that. So wanted to make sure folks understand a little different there than therapist, counselor. Those are big words, right? That kind of encompass a lot of different professions. So always nice to point out the psychological aspect of things. So it's pretty much the top tier of therapists, in my opinion. So it's a good thing. We're working with experts here. That's what I'm trying to say. So, but good afternoon. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to go ahead and get right into our comments and questions, but a couple of admin things since we did have a few folks jump on. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. This is being recorded. It will be shared on both of our accounts, and it is live. So we want to make sure that if you put it in the chat, it'll stay more private for us. So if you have questions with private information, we can make sure we don't share that publicly in a public space. So, okay, let's get to it. Could you tell us a little bit about the problem of anxiety in kids, Dr. Buehner? I know that this has been a concept that we've been talking a lot about. So a little bit more definition from you.
So what we're talking about when we talk about anxiety can look a little bit different depending on the age of the child. But for younger children, we're looking at potential issues with excessive worry, where they're worried. Oftentimes, young kids are worried about external issues. So I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared of insects. I'm scared something might happen to mom or dad, things outside of themselves. And anxiety for those young children may show up in changes in their sleep patterns. They may be waking up during the night afraid to go to sleep. Their appetites may change. They may become more picky eaters or more restrictive eaters. It can also look like irritability and kind of a short fuse. So any of that sort of dysregulated mood that represents a change from their normal baseline behavior. With older kids, teenagers, what we're looking at oftentimes is irritability. It could be changes in their focus, their ability to kind of stay focused and organized. They're easily fatigued. That irritability piece that I mentioned is really big. So while we may kind of conventionally think of teenagers as irritable and closed off and tired all the time anyway, what we're looking at is a change from their baseline where they normally function well, go to school, can do all the things, but now you may see more worried, more irritable, lashing out more. You may see teens who are trying to distract away from painful worries by using substances. So like I say, it can look a little bit different depending on the age of the child.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to point out. Age is a factor, also knowing your kid, right? Understanding what they were like before, or is this how they've always been, kind of extracting that. It seems to be something that we face a lot of questions about. Everybody's like, but my child changed. Well, puberty does that to some extent, right?
Right.
But yeah. One thing I glossed over, I want to make sure folks understand that we really are here to try to make you feel better. We are not here to diagnose folks. So something I forgot to say, I usually preface in these webinars, we're talking about criteria, right? And criteria has a lot of give. So folks, remember that. Please don't be diagnosing yourself or your child, but definitely if you feel that some of these things are coming up in your family, please feel free to reach out. We can help you connect with providers. So just a kind of caveat there, typically,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. We're hoping that folks leave this hour with more information about kind of what to look for and what to say, and feeling empowered to move from concerned to knowing exactly what to do this afternoon or in conversations later on with their child, or what calls to make, feeling a little bit more sure about that. So I appreciate you qualifying all of that as well.
Yeah, it's good to know what we're here for, right?
Yes.
So thanks for bringing the criteria and the information and definition. That's wonderful. It feels like there's been a rise in anxiety, and we've heard about it. There's a youth mental health crisis that has been established by the Surgeon General. Just wondering, kind of, if there's specifics to this conversation that you wanted to bring up, Dr. Buehner.
Certainly. So in the past, we have known that before the age of 18, likely 1 in 10 children will have been diagnosed or treated for anxiety. Now, since COVID, those numbers for younger children, or for children, are looking more like around 30%, at least 1 in 5, all the way up to 35, depending on which study you're reading. And the interesting thing about it, Marcy, is parents are equally anxious. We're seeing it, up to half of parents who are polled noting anxiety symptoms in themselves. So this is a problem that everybody's experiencing. What we're talking about here today is related to children and teens, but it's worth noting here that everybody, broadly speaking, we're seeing rises in anxiety among lots of groups of people.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that and back that up, we had over 8,000 screenings just in the first quarter of this year in our mental health screenings that are free and online. And I'll share the link, folks. But of those, most of them were anxiety. And I thought that was interesting. We had an increase in ADHD for this one quarter, and then a significant in anxiety amongst our youth, ages 11 to 25, and along adults 35 to 55, which is where I think of tends a lot of parenting. Not all parenting happens there, but a lot does. So
Well, when you think about it, in these years during COVID, we experienced, all of us, children included, we had social isolation, we had a lack of structure in the brain. One's life really thrives when we have some level of structure and stability in our lives. When we have fewer question marks, we have more freedom to enjoy and thrive. We had missed milestones for children. So, they weren't going to proms, they weren't graduating from kindergarten together, so many different things that we think of as, these kind of seminal events for kids, they missed out on. And included in that is missing out on those friendships, those social interactions. Being around other people gives you opportunities to be loved and appreciated, to think somebody's funny, to think somebody's fun to be around, or a good friend. And when you miss out on those opportunities, you don't have a lot of data points to tell you that you're doing pretty good in life, or that you're loved or appreciated. Our kids missed a lot of that for several critical years. So if you're wondering to yourself why everything seems like it's going back to normal, or we're finding our rhythm, the reality is, without that structure, sometimes we can see how dark things can get in our own minds, and kids are still reeling from that, just like many of the rest of us.
yeah, that's important information. So how much kind of back to school anxiety is normal? Normal's that setting on a dryer, right? It's not really a thing, but how much can we usually expect, and what concerns should we be looking for as parents?
Right. So, good question. Let's think about going back to school. So, any child, whether it's a kid entering kindergarten or a teenager, going into senior year, any young person is wondering, who are my teachers going to be? What will they think of me? How will they like me? Where will I sit in the classroom? Who's going to walk with me? Who's going to sit with me at lunch? Will I feel stupid? Will I look stupid when I'm walking around? There are so many different moments of the day that a child imagines where they might be uncomfortable, or during which they might be uncomfortable. But sometimes when you start piling those worries up, those thoughts up, it can manifest as some pretty significant anxiety. So before the school year starts, certainly we're going to be dealing with some of that. We often see with young people, the Sunday scaries is what we call them, where you have on Sunday afternoons or Sundays, you sort of lose the day because you're so worried about all the ways you're going to have to be on for the next 5 days, Monday through Friday, that it's really difficult to feel like you can just relax on that Sunday and be present in the moment. And that's something too that adults experience as well. But to your question about what's normal, So again, let's think about our baseline. If you had a child who is typically sleeping pretty well or has a pretty normal appetite or gets in what they're supposed to in terms of movement, exercise, friendships, etc., and suddenly they don't want to go to school, they're shutting down. Their feelings are so intense that they're not able to do the things that they need to do, or those symptoms are going on for a pretty prolonged period of time. So if we're talking several weeks into the school year and the child's still having nightmares or still experiencing school avoidance symptoms, we're going to start talking about this is kind of going beyond normal back to school anxiety and into something more in the clinical realm where we might want to enlist a professional.
It's good to know. So big sustained changes. That's what I took from that.
Yes.
So yeah. Um, yeah. What can parents do? And how can we respond better to kind of those symptoms that might be showing up, even if they're short term? What are some good tips and tricks for parents?
So, a few different things to think about. So, one of the things that I like for parents to consider, and this is for all of us, whether there's an anxiety concern at stake or not, we want to kind of create an environment of support for our kids. So, that looks like creating opportunities for communication. That looks like modeling for them that if you're going through something yourself, like kind of checking your own anxious behaviors or checking your own dysregulated moods to figure out how do I identify when something's going on with me and what steps do I take to take care of myself. Think of the lesson that you model for a child when you say, I've been really worried about this thing at work and it's really been bothering me. It kind of shows up as like I can't sleep or I'm kind of stressing about it during the day, but I'm going to really work hard at dealing with that situation. So we're identifying it and we recognize that it's problematic for us and here are the steps we're going to take to figure it out, and we're communicating that as if it's perfectly normal and no stigma, no judgment, to say I'm going through something and here's how I'm going to care for myself. It may seem like it's easy or common sense, but it sends a really powerful healthy message when you model for a child, I know I'm dealing with something and I don't want it to impact everybody, or I don't want it to continue to plague me, so I'm going to work on it. We also want to kind of have at a sort of meta level a communication piece kind of enhanced. So let's say the school year is starting. You say, this year I recognize sometimes we can really get in the weeds. And this school year, I'd like to kind of slow down every now and then. I know we're on like a tight schedule with, sports and extracurriculars and all of the things, certainly. But I want to have some moments with you where we sort of just slow down and check in. And I hope that's okay with you. So maybe on Fridays when everything kind of dies down a little bit, or maybe throughout the week, if we could have some sort of soft moments where we sort of just check in, that would be really great. Another piece, and I mentioned it a moment ago, but it bears repeating. I think the ability to say, I want to create a positive, supportive environment the best way that I can. So I'm going to remove as many variables as possible. So, hey, kiddo, what do you want me to have ready for you after school? Or what kind of snacks do you want to pack in your lunch? Let's talk about how to make it as good a day as possible, right? So we're going to kind of pre-plan some of that stuff and give them some agency in terms of planning meals or planning their first day of school outfit or planning what snacks are going to be ready after school to make it as easy as possible for me to come home and kind of unload as children tend to do after school. So again, we're creating opportunities for communication. We're creating stability where they know what to expect, and we're giving them a little bit of agency in terms of how to build this soft communicative environment. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think some ways that we've done that here personally as a parent myself, I have a 9-year-old. We put in a schedule, right? Like we have a routine and we talk about what that routine is going to be. And he gets some agency and some input into what it looks like. And, he doesn't parent me, right? Like there's still
Right.
boundaries. We're not giving him all the junk food as snacks, but maybe we add a piece of junk food on Wednesday or something like that after a day we know has a harder schedule.
Absolutely. So screen time is fine, but we're going to have some limits on it. You know what I mean? And I want to
Right.
talk to you sometimes. So I want to make sure that you're ready for that. Like when I'm coming to you with that, it doesn't mean you need to expect it. I'm going to lower the boom on you or that you're in trouble. I just want to sort of check in with you
Right.
about how things are going. And I hope we can do that over the course of this school year. So again, this is kind of before the year starts or before the week starts. And if you know that your child is dealing with some anxiety or you suspect that they're dealing with some anxiety, again, this sort of meta communication where we're talking about how we talk, where we're talking about how we'd like to check in and how we'd like to listen and how they're not going to get in trouble or we're not going to jump into problem solving mode or overreact. I want to be able to listen to you and hear where you're coming from. I don't want you going through any of this stuff alone. I know you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah, some principles to underline there. Don't try to fix it. Just listen. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing. I think that's the hardest piece we teach that mental health first aid too, that you can't solve everyone's problems for them. And that's a hard thing though for people. I think parents especially, sometimes we want to fix it, but you can't. So and sometimes you can, but that's not the first step, right? So
Right. When I'm doing
but
therapy with folks, I'll say, be careful not to Home Depot the problem. We don't want to treat somebody's worries or concerns or what they're going through like it's a broken commode, right? So let them talk. You can even preface it by saying, "What do you need from me? Do you need a listening ear, or do you need me to help you problem solve?" But like you said, the most important piece of that is listening. And if you have that tendency, if you know that about yourself, that you're a fixer, a cleaner upper, a silver liner, and you recognize that this person's going through something where that might not necessarily be useful, kind of zip it up and do some active listening a little bit. And it can be tough at first, but we're trying to give those opportunities. This is that meta communication piece again. I want to be able to check in with you over the course of the year. I want to ask you how things are going. I'd like this year for it to look a little bit different. And I'm going to promise you, I'm going to try not to overreact and always sort of listen to you and be able to do that. I hope you'll trust me that we can give it a shot.
yeah, there's a script, y'all, if you need one, right, to work from. That's perfect. I love having that. So yeah, I think we wanted to kind of discuss some symptoms and level of acuity, things like that. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about kind of when we have that established pattern and we've had that open communication, but things aren't changing, or what kind of flags and concerns do we need to be concerned about at different ages, after that fact, after that's been set up?
Right. So a lot of parents, and I have young children myself, like we might observe symptoms and think, that's something I'm going to note, or that's something that's kind of an ongoing thing I'm seeing and observing here. But when we notice that our child is dealing with a symptom that's either very intense, right? That's something that's keeping them from doing what they want to do. So they don't want to go to school, or they don't want to interact with friends. Something that's experienced so intensely that it's keeping them from being able to do their day, a functional impairment, if you will. So something that's so intense that it's a definite change from their baseline of where they want to be, where you want for them to be in terms of interaction, functioning in different arenas of their life. So is it so intense? Is it causing such an impact? Or is it going on for such a long period of time that I recognize it's taking a toll on them, certainly taking a toll on everybody? Um, so looking again at the intensity piece of the duration piece, and how problematic, how much of an impact that it's having, these could be really kind of ways to realize we've gone from something that's something we should talk about or kind of keep an eye on to something I need to kind of consider having a conversation about or making a call about intensity, duration, impact.
Thanks for underlining that again. I know we kind of sort of touched on in the beginning, but I wanted to make sure we kind of put it into context here. So, yeah, I think that's really important. And you're right. That intensity, duration, those are our keywords, right? That's when something is time to go get some help, additional help, right? Or maybe change things up. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. And I'll talk about that at the end, on like kind of resources for folks, because I don't want folks to feel they're hanging, but I think we have a lot more to cover. And I want to make sure that we're getting to that piece. Yeah, one of the big things, I think parents are nervous, to even bring this kind of conversation up, right? Like they're nervous about, talking to their kids about their problems, not sure where to start. And you gave us some great tips already. But how do you start these conversations if it's kind of new for you? I know you said, you want to set up that stuff in advance, but maybe we're sitting in the moment and school started and things are happening that we did not prepare for. How do you even start that conversation?
Great question, because it's really difficult to move sometimes for us as parents from the moment of, I keep seeing this with my kiddo, or that's really different for them, or that's worrisome. Like moving from that notion right there in our minds to actually taking action, like how do I bring it up? Or what if they lash out at me, or don't want to talk about it, or shut the door in my face, or if it scares them for me to bring it up? Like it can be really hard to move from awareness to action. But let's talk about how to broach the topic. So with young children, we can start with open-ended, right? So I noticed, or you seem upset today, or I notice you keep having those dreams. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on, right? So we are asking open-ended questions, maybe based on what we observe or have seen. to just say, I wonder, or could you tell me a little bit about, right? So asking questions in such a way where the child's able to sort of tell their story, and they might tell you that they keep having a dream, and you don't have to do dream analysis specifically, but we can look for certain themes. Are they expressing worries about something happening to you or to another person in their family? Or are they expressing worries about what's going to happen at school? Are they expressing worries that have nothing to do with anything based in reality, but nonetheless are having an impact? So we're not minimizing, we're not kind of poo-pooing what they're going through. Oh, it's fine, or you don't need to worry about that, or anything like that. What we're seeing is a level of alarm in our child, and we're going to let them tell us the story of that. Okay, tell me more about that. I wonder where that's coming from. So you're asking questions, asking them to basically fill in those blanks or elaborate a little bit for you to help you understand where they're coming from, how much of an impact, how much it's bothering them. You want to hear their story. And then you're going to express, hopefully, something to the effect of, I'm so glad you told me. I really appreciate you telling me about that. That must have really been upsetting to you. To really validate for them, I'm glad that you told me. Now, we can all imagine over the lifespan how powerful it is to have the adult who cares about us, or an adult who cares a great deal about us, say, I care about what you're going through. Tell me about it. Oh, I'm really glad that you shared that. It's just incredibly validating and empowering to have that message sent early. But specific here, we want to kind of let them know, I'm glad you told me. Let's think about some things that we could do. So we are going to collaborate. We are going to collaborate on problem solving, right? I'm not minimizing. I'm not saying it's no big deal, honey. That's not a problem. Let's not worry about that. I'm saying let's think about some things that we can do. So maybe with regard to nightmares, we might talk about a nighttime routine to help things feel as calm as possible. If it's more like during the daytime type anxieties, one of my favorite ways to go about that with children is a tomorrow box, where we design a shoe box and we decorate it, and maybe they have a stack of post-its. Oh, I'm so sorry, gosh. So sorry about that. We might have a stack of post-its inside the tomorrow box that is for nothing but writing down what you had a dream about or what you're worried about. And your job with the stack of post-its and the markers inside the box is either to draw me a picture or to make a note about the things that you want to talk about tomorrow with me or talk about later today with me. If there's something bothering you, you can draw it or you can write it down and put it in the tomorrow box. And then we will talk about it as soon as we get a chance. Now, what does this teach a child to do? This teaches a child to recognize when they're scared or worried about something. It teaches them to identify the stressor, whether it's real or based in reality or imagined or completely manufactured. It also teaches them that it's okay to enlist support and that support will arrive. If you need me, I'm there for you. And again, those are powerful messages to teach a child. For older kids, I think having conversations, again, based in starting with open-ended questions based on observation, right? So I noticed you've been in your room a lot and I'm worried about you, and I wanted to kind of chat a little bit about what's going on with you. So we're asking that open-ended question. And as I mentioned before, maybe we've laid the groundwork that you're not going to be in trouble if you share with me, or if you talk to me about your grades being low, or, so-and-so is not talking to you anymore, whatever it is. I'm not going to try to jump in and solve the problem. I'm not going to jump all over you with judgment when I realize I'm seeing the severity, the acuity of the situation, how serious this is for you, more than I am the long-term impacts of how it bothers me. I'm seeing how much it bothers you as more of a priority than how much it bothers me. So I don't know. I think that for our parents, we want to jump in and problem solve because that's what we've always done for them. But to the extent that we're trying to show up as validating and teaching them how to identify their feelings and work through their feelings in a healthy way, it's really important to let them tell the story and then show up in the way that they need us to help them. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I think those are great techniques. It's fun for me to hear a professional say also, like in youth mental health first aid, we talking about I statements and talking about behaviors and actions and thoughts or patterns of thought that we're seeing from them being the way we talk. So I just love that translation is exactly what you all are doing as advising for us to do. It's always nice to see that on the same page. Yeah. And that open communication piece is not easy. It's easy to say, right? And it's not easy to think of in the moment sometimes. Like you said, I can imagine with like, my grades are terrible and I'm very stressed out. You go right to, but you have to have your grades to do X and Y. In your own head, you have to stop that thought, right? So it's kind of nice to not be as reactive is really kind of what I'm hearing you say, which is great. So, um, yeah. And something we wanted to mention too, I think was that talking about mental health problems, like if we have to phrase this as, okay, it's time for us to get you some help because, the tools I have aren't working or something like that. Um, if we talk about it and like label it, I'm worried you have, some kind of issue. Is that what you want folks to do? Or like kind of how do we approach like maybe needing that help? Maybe it's
No,
starting to label it.
excellent question. I mean, and so many parents grappling with that specific question. And I think there is something to be said for simply noticing what you see, right? I noticed you haven't been opening your door much at all, or we haven't seen much of you, or I noticed you don't seem like you can concentrate, or you seem really crabby. And I just want to talk about it because I feel like something's going on with you and I want to hear what you're going through, or see if there are any ways that I can help. So, noticing and talking about what it is that you observe. So, we have to be really careful with our tone here. Some of the teens I've worked with over the years, they kind of gripe about feeling like things are transactional, like you need to be interacting with us more, and then it's a big shut in the door shut in the face, and everything feels like it's you just want something from me because it looks good on paper or whatever it is, or I just need you to make good grades. Other than that, I'm mad at you. Like, for them to feel like you just want to hear what they're going through without fear of recrimination or consequences can be really powerful. Whatever it is that you're going through, like, I want to go through it with you or understand it at least so that I can try to help you. Like, you're not in this thing by yourself. I think that these are powerful messages. And yes, you may get the door shut in your face, but if the message that your child receives from you fairly regularly, and certainly when needed or when concerned, coming to them, trying to show them support, let them understand about you, I will throw everything I've got at helping you feel better, get better, or have what you need to get better. Those are really powerful things for a child to experience. It can be easy. It can be the simplest solution, short term, in the moment, to just say, well, to heck with it. You know what I mean? If they're going to have that kind of attitude, and certainly we don't want to, face any lashing out. The problem, though, is if we let that go on for a period of time where we're dealing with concerns that they may be going through something, but we're not talking about it. We're talking about kind of teens, adolescents here. I think that that can kind of create an environment of nobody talking and everybody just sort of walking around in tension at the very least. So we want to be creating those opportunities for communication. And again, trying to send and resend that message of, I want to kind of check in about how you're doing. I'm noticing with you, um, from the standpoint of concern and support.
Yeah, and the key points there, concern, support. Yeah, it's really important to keep that in mind. And sometimes you might need to get yourself some help too, and do the little talk to yourself before you go into these situations, right? At least I do as a parent. So, yeah,
Yes, and for parents who are, right at this moment thinking like, no, really, with my teen, how do I start this conversation? Because they very well could just shut the door in my face or, roll their eyes and walk away. There is also the option of just sharing the 988 number and asking to have a talk with them about putting that in their phone. So 988 is a number that people can call when they're going through some sort of mental health issue, and it can connect you to the local resources 24/7. They can help you either identify if you need kind of a crisis hotline, if you need resources for all kinds of issues that you might be going through, figure out where to go to the hospital. Like, it's all there for you to help, and it's all local and offered 24/7. And saying to your child, saying to your young adult or to your teenager, I'd like to have a talk about the 988 number. I want to put it into your phone. And you may never need it, but one of your friends one day may be going through a crisis. They may be going through something and you don't know what to do with the situation. I hope in that moment that you will call me and I will help you. But I also want you to have this resource just in case someone in your life or you is ever going through something. So can we get your phone out? Can you put that number in your phone? And can you promise me that you'll use it?
yeah, it's great too. And yeah, I've started that conversation with some of my nieces and nephews, even like, I'm on the 988 thing. This is why I'm talking to you about it. Maybe your mom doesn't, but I will. Right.
Good
And
for
and
you.
hopefully, and if it's not a local answer, that's okay. They get to the local person. So that is nationally offered. So anyone can call 988. I love that piece. And then it's there for anyone who's dealing with someone else's problem. So sometimes, yeah, you don't know where to go. I think that's a piece that we lost when we called it the suicide prevention hotline. We lost that piece that bystanders, helpers, friends can connect, and that's really important to underline. Also, that talking about mental health doesn't give someone a mental health issue, right? So talking about
Right.
suicidality doesn't put it in their head. Talking about anxiety doesn't give them anxiety, or at least it shouldn't. So I just want to underline that as someone, as an advocate. I hear that a lot from folks, that they don't want to have these hard conversations because they don't want to start the problem. Just to underline that from your perspective, is that also what you all share?
Absolutely. So you don't have to diagnose the problem. You don't have to apply a specific diagnostic code to it. You don't have to say, I think you're going through anxiety, or I think you're depressed, or any of these things. Again, the observation can be about the behaviors that you observe, what we know is factually true, right? And that can be about their moods, or if that's too sticky of a topic, you can talk about the behaviors that you observe specifically, like it feels like you don't want to be around us, or we're not seeing much of you, or you seem super stressed about stuff, and it seems like you're suffering. And I don't want you to suffer. Like, I'm observing some things and I want to talk about them a little bit. So, those conversations that we've talked about some prompts for now, let's say you open that line of communication up with your child and they communicate to you, yes, I'm dealing with some things. We know, I mentioned that young children tend to worry about external stressors. Adolescents oftentimes are dealing with more worrying about themselves. So, what do people think of me? How am I perceived? What do I think of my body? Is my performance at school and sports, et cetera, am I enough? Am I who I'm supposed to be? Do I fit in? Am I likable? Am I appealing? Like, it's all very me oriented, which it should be. This is how we develop, kind of understand ourselves and develop into adults. And so if you recognize symptoms and you broach the topic and they maybe bring up what they're going through, that you kind of help them, again, you listen actively, that you resist the urge to fix, that you resist the urge to jump in, that you resist the urge to minimize, or, tidy up the corners of what they're talking about, that you listen fully. And then you say, well, what would be useful right now? Do you want a hug? Do you want me to help you problem solve? Let's talk about this, because I see that you're suffering. I see that you're going through a lot, and I want to help you with that piece. Like, you're not on this earth to suffer. You deserve to like your life and like yourself, right? So we acknowledge suffering. We acknowledge changes. And sometimes that acknowledging the suffering, acknowledging the change from baseline, or where that kiddo wants to be in their life, or how they wish things could be, and saying to them, do you feel like we need to talk about maybe some support for you? Right. So, again, your job is not to diagnose, I think you have clinical depression, or I think you have this, that, or the other, to name it. Your job is to help figure out how you can help deal with it. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's great. And I apologize. Our little prep, I got a little off track. So my apologies there. But yeah, I think that's important. And I think that's really the key issues that we hear a lot from parents. So thanks for bringing up 988, and then not minimizing, and just trusting folks, having that trusting conversation if it's possible. And if it's not, focusing on those I statements, that's really important. Um, we had talked about wanting to talk about social anxiety, and also anxiety around going back to school with the school shootings that have happened, and things like that. Are there specific tricks around? Probably let's stick with the school anxiety first, and then we'll get into the school shooting, unless there's things that are similar.
Okay, so with regard to school anxiety, we are seeing rates of social anxiety and anxiety about going to school rise. Every one of us is aware that after being closed off from the world to some extent for these past few years, that it's a common reaction for many people, adults included, to want to stay home more, to feel like they're safer and there's less to worry about, deal with, etc., if you just lock yourself away. The problem with it is, when you don't give yourself opportunities to be out there and have data points in your day-to-day existence where you're liked, or where you're scared of something and then you get through it and you can feel proud and accomplished about that, if you miss out on opportunities to work through your fears, to have social interactions where people appreciate you and like being around you, and you get actual feedback from another person that makes you feel like you're meaningful and wanted and impactful in this world, you really can be stuck at home with no feedback and with little interaction and isolated, to the point that you're kind of just in your own head, and a whole lot of problems can get worse. And so that's kind of a simplistic explanation of why we don't suggest staying home for kids who are going through some level of school anxiety. As much as they want to stay home, as much as they want to hide from the opportunity, or feel like I can't take the test, or I might have a panic attack, we got to get them to school. We have to figure out ways to help them manage the anxiety that they're going through, to be aware of it. Maybe that starts with conversations with us. Maybe we have those conversations and then enlist support from a professional. But it is counterindicated. We do not want to keep kids home from school because of a parent's school anxiety. We need to get them into school with opportunities to interact, to learn, to work through.
And that's important. I think some parents are concerned about getting their kid into help because they're afraid they'll be pulled out of school. And hearing that that's actually not even helpful is really important, I think. Thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, and then with the mass violence issues, just the potential of that happening. What are some ways that we talk to our kids, and what are some things that we should be doing to ourselves too, I think, around that issue?
Okay, so a couple things to think about here. So, for children who have not been exposed yet to any awareness of mass violence, they're going to be going through things like drills at school. And you may have some information from the teachers or from the school system about that, that we're going to be doing some, teacher plays hide and seek or principal plays hide and seek or some level of drills that the child may be part of, and they don't know exactly what it's all about. But you can ask about sort of the drills when you find out about them, or if you want to query the teachers or the school staff about how that's going to look. They may not give you specific details about that type of trainings for sort of security reasons, but they can kind of give you the nuts and bolts of what you as a parent need to know about kind of when those drills will happen. If your child comes home and has questions about the drills, you can say, do you have any questions? Did you guys do that activity today? Tell me any questions that you might have. If the child has any awareness of school violence or why they're doing those types of drills, if that comes into your awareness, and you're able to say to them, what questions do you have? Let's sit down and let's talk about this. So we can be vessels for all of that stuff without minimizing, right? Because we can explain that there are people out there who are not supposed to be around schools who have dangerous motives. And for that reason, we are ready. Your school may look a little bit different. It may have, metal detectors, or you guys may be doing more drills, but we are talking about readiness. So we're going to do everything we can to keep you safe. And that looks like, doing these types of drills, that your teacher is aware of these kinds of threats and that they have plans in place to take care of everybody and keep everybody safe. We're going to take lots of steps to keep you safe. We're going to be ready. So what we're doing is safety. What we're talking about is readiness. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, it's not talking about inviting the problem in, it's talking about being very ready. I like that framing. Just for context, my own child, when he was in kindergarten, had the drill. I didn't know it happened. They
Mhm.
didn't mention anything. He didn't say a word. He thought it was real, and that we had never talked about it. It came up. So, folks, talk to your kids, help them prepare for that in advance. I think it's probably important. We should have had more conversations with our kindergarten teacher about what it looked like. So I think, yeah, being proactive is probably, as a parent to parent, I'm going to tell y'all to be a little proactive. Make sure if you can get a heads up when they're happening or after they've happened, even, which is, I think, what safety wise they had to do at our school was just tell us after. And I was like, just send me a note, let me know what happened so I can make sure we talk about it. So
Yeah, that's an
yeah.
excellent point, Marcy. And I think it's something we should talk a little bit about, if you don't mind. Enlisting the support and the kind of creating that communication line with teachers or with school staff is a really solid piece of advice for parents. So if your child is exhibiting some symptoms of anxiety about school or just anxiety in general, and you feel like this is something that a teacher might need to be aware of. Teachers know about separation anxiety. They understand about anxiety. They may understand that they have a very good understanding of if your child needs to occasionally go to doctor's appointments, this, that, or the other. It's okay to enlist the support of teachers and help them understand kind of what your child is dealing with, some of the accommodations that you've been working on to make things easier for your child. Enlist the support of your child's team. If they have a school counselor and you feel like that's somebody that they need to be in communication, who might be able to help them throughout the course of the year, a school counselor or school counseling personnel can really help a child with the school-based issues that will impede them being able to learn. So that's useful information to know. Enlisting that whole team, creating a team of support around your child is really, really important. Not just about like, if there are any drills you want for me to be aware of, or if there's any specific verbiage that you guys are using at the school to talk about these drills, that would be helpful for me to know so that I can be able to kind of debrief with my child and help them feel as safe and ready and protected as possible. Make that an ongoing conversation. Put a note into your phone, email the teacher every couple of weeks or once a month if you want for them to kind of be in the loop about how things are going. Create an atmosphere of support around your child.
Yeah, I think that was one thing we benefited from. We were at a smaller school that had that ability to to do that. I think big schools can do it too. We just happened to walk into a place that was like that, thankfully. So, but of course, also being a mental health person, I automatically think of a team. I think I look at things differently than a lot of parents. So, but it's good to have that information. Yeah. And I will say, part of our team ultimately was, the after school care folks, and
Mhm.
our bus drivers, and, the principal got involved because some things happened, and the principal was the one who was like, hey, we had a drill today so that we didn't have problems later that week from the concern that happened with my particular child's issues. So, but I think that is universal too, that everybody needs to have that community and that village. And if we look at raising kids that way, that helps a lot, right? So boost it up. I have a couple of questions in the chat. I think we've covered most of the things we had planned to talk about. One parent is asking, her son has some anxious thoughts, but she actually has autism herself, and she feels amplified because of his concerns. And she's wondering, like, as a parent, is it typical for us to have feelings too about our kids' feelings, and kind of any tips for us for helping maintain that vesselness that you were talking about, that being a
Yeah.
vessel attitude? Mhm.
So I think a really helpful distinction, I'm going to use that word with intention, to make when you've listened to your child, tell me about a little bit about what's going on, whatever age they are, whatever they're ready to communicate to you, that you listen to them and you haven't intervened and you haven't, passed judgment or tried to fix it, that you really listen to them tell their story. Maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's the car ride to school, whatever it is. Really take advantage of those casual moments where you're not necessarily eye to eye, because those can be golden. But anyways, I think it's really helpful to help a child discern or make the distinction between, is this something we can do something about, right? So is there action that we need to take here? Alternatively, is this something where I'm really glad that you told me, like, tell me about how much this is bugging you. Like, is it impacting your sleep? Like, or is it, I mean, how does that actually feel for you to be dealing with all these thoughts? I think that that can be really powerful to say, is this something you feel like we need to take some action on? Can we check in with some teachers about a plan to bring your grade up? Or can I get you into tutoring? Or do you want more opportunities to socialize with this other group of friends if this other group of friends isn't super reliable right now, that you offer opportunities to problem solve? On the other hand, and this is an and or, so it could be both, it might be one. If it's a problem where there's no action to be taken, it's not something within your child's control to determine the outcome. How much can we work with the bother of it? How much can we work on, you seem really angry about it. I'm wondering what I could do to help. What might help you kind of blow off some steam? Or you seem really sad about it. How can I help you with that? Like, we basically offer to help with self care. Like, we offer to teach them how to care for themselves, how to understand that your feelings matter and you're going through something. So let's say a child is worried that they might have a test at school and they might screw up on it. And what are you worried about? Tell me a little bit more. And they say, I'm worried you're going to be mad at me or my teacher's going to be mean to me. Huh, I wonder what that would feel like, and they explain to you, like, I hate it when you're mad at me, or I don't like how she looks when she's upset with me, or whatever, some iteration of that. The idea here is to kind of go with it and understand, like, what's the outcome you're scared of right now. And if it's really upsetting you, like, what can we either do about it, or what can we do to help you feel a little bit better, to take care of you while you're going through this, right? It really teaches an idea of self-nurturing, responding to our needs, identifying the problem and responding to our needs. And I really like that distinction. I wonder what would be helpful to you right now. Do we want to problem solve? Do you just need to vent to me? Do you just need support? Like, offering at that point where you've listened to what the problem is. And now what should we do? What would be most useful to you? It can be really powerful to kind of expand the conversation that way.
That's awesome. We have another question about separation anxiety, where that continuously high because they're away at school, but they settle once they're in the classroom. Is that something that we can prepare ourselves for and our children for? Some tips and tricks along that specific aspect.
Sure. So it's pretty common. Most children go through it to some extent at some stage of life. And the idea here is to create as much support and validation as possible. We're going to be going to school. We're going to school, and that's what's going to happen. But to figure out as many ways as possible to create structure, loving support, and kind of an expectation that I can't wait to reunite with you at the end of the day. So I think children tend to forget that, like, we're going to have this reunion at the end of the day, right? And I'm going to make it pretty special. And how can we make it as nice as possible? But also, what is the basic premise of their fear of separating from you? Is it something's going to happen to you or life is easier with you? Kind of getting to the bottom of what is exactly the thing that they're most afraid of with regard to this. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago, don't feel like you need to diagnose. And I don't necessarily want you to feel like you have to treat your child's worries, irritability, anxieties, etc. But what we're looking at is help me understand. I wonder what it is that you're so scared of, or what are you scared will happen, right? And again, we're not minimizing, we're not poo-pooing, we're not judging, we're not trying to fix. We're just trying to understand a little bit and trying to offset whatever that fear is. If they're worried about something happening to you, I'll leave you a note in your lunchbox, or I'll see you after school and here's the snack we're going to have together, or here's where we're going to cuddle on the couch and we'll use your favorite blanket. Like we try to create as much stability, hope, looking forward to as possible, while also doing that validating and understanding piece about what it is that they're going through.
Thanks. Thanks for covering that. That was definitely a good question. One has come through about distraction. A teen is using distraction a lot to handle anxious fears and kind of withdrawing a little bit because of that. Wondering, they were asking kind of if you have tips for like when is distraction too much, right? Is it okay is it healthy to, play a video game for a while and kind of escape, or where is that kind of level as from a parent's point of view that we should be concerned?
Sure. So broadly speaking, I don't know this family in particular, I'm not blessed to know them, but broadly speaking, we want to think about that child's baseline, right? So where they normally are in terms of ability to go to school, thrive at school, have positive relationships, take care of their bodies to the extent that they sleep and eat and exercise and play. We want to kind of think about their baseline. So if we're noticing so much distraction that they're not getting enough sleep or they seem completely zonked out from video games, we may want to kind of place some limits on that. But again, part of what we're doing is creating an atmosphere of support. We're talking about what we observe without judgment. To your question, a couple questions ago, we're doing our best to manage our angst about their feelings and to talk about our observations. One of my favorite techniques with parents is strike while the iron is cold. So not in the heat of battle, not when you're both screaming at each other about how long they've been playing video games, but when things are calm and relatively peaceful, whatever that looks like at home for you, be able to say, I'm kind of noticing this thing and I'm a little worried about you. And I just want to sort of talk about what's going on with you and talk about some ways that I can help you. And so we're trying to create that atmosphere of support. We are going to keep trying. We are going to keep sending the message of I'm never going to stop showing up for you. So this thing worries me. Like we're going to do this much of it a day, and I'm going to take steps to protect you because I want to keep you safe and I want to keep you well. So structure, support, and continuing to revisit the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's important. I'm wondering if that parent wasn't reacting to kind of this TikTok thing I've been seeing, this like trend about distraction is bad for you, and I'm like, no, not always, right? Like it
Always,
can't
not
always
always.
be. Yeah.
It's good to have an opportunity to blow off steam, whatever that looks like for each of us. Each of us needs to have some degree of agency over how we spend our time each day. But what we're talking about is when your kiddo finishes the video game, or when they finally come out of their room and they look groggy eyed, or they're finally ready to talk, or maybe they just want to sit in the quiet with you, but be in the same space as you, that you're able to show up for them. Like we don't stop trying, we don't stop caring, we don't stop giving them opportunities to interact.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you so much for that. We have one question that you don't have to answer, but they wanted to know if you could give your thoughts on how to decide if adding medication is right. Since you're a PhD and not an MD, she can't do prescriptions. Some folks do get that confused, so I just want to make that clear. I'm not saying that the question person doesn't know that, but I always like to make it clear that MDs are psychiatrists and psychologists are the PhDs. So, but do you have thoughts on like when to think about medication, or is that something you just kind of stay away from?
Sure. So I work at KPA and KPF with lots of PhDs and PsyDs and master's level mental health providers who we are, most of us, very much in support of if we need to take multiple modes of treatment to help an individual feel better, that we're amenable to being supportive of that. So if you're in talk therapy and we feel like we need some adjunctive psychiatric care, getting them the right meds to help them kind of reestablish a safe, healthy baseline, then we're going to help get them in front of the right person. I'm by no means am I closed off to the idea of it. And if a family or if an individual certainly feels like that's something they want to consider and talk a little bit about, do a trial run with, I'm going to check in with them about symptoms and side effects and how things are feeling and how things are going. And it's an ongoing conversation. Nothing is a life sentence, as if you make this choice or give this a try, it's a done deal for life. This is the kind of thing where I'm going to support your treatment in whatever way I can. I'm going to connect with your parents as the psychologist. I'm going to connect with your caregivers, whoever else is on your team. We are going to create an environment of support around you. And, the parents, again, that message of, I will do whatever it takes to help you feel better and be your best self. And whatever it is that you need, I'll help you get there.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we like to present as mental health care, right? It's not just one person. It's often a team, and that's an important environment to build. And if providers aren't working as a team, then maybe it's time to find some new providers, So folks, I can say that. And they asked about herbal versus pharmaceutical. Again, I think that is a case where you need to speak with folks specifically around your specific case. But
Yeah,
in
I'd be talking out of my wheel. That's way, way out of my wheelhouse here. So
yeah, I was just like, we can't really answer those questions as neither of us are MDs, but I do think having those frank conversations with folks that are qualified from different angles is always good. There's different things that help different issues. So, and just keeping your mind open, and not, and like you said, not a life sentence. I think that's really important too. I think some folks used to think if you got on a med, you had to stay on it for the rest of your life. That's not always the case by any means. And there's always adjustment. If there isn't, then there's a problem. So, because
Well,
life
and
changes, right? Mhm.
Marcy, you mentioned TikTok a few minutes ago, and I think that children, teenagers are talking more about mental health, about therapy, about mental health treatment more these days. They're more aware of that being common. They're more aware of when that's happening with their friends. They see people in the media who are going through those same types of experiences. So, to the extent that we think that talking about mental health with children is verboten or it's going to, set something off with them, we're really sticking our heads in the sand. I think that we can really capitalize on the fact that children know more, to some extent, know more about mental health and are having conversations. School counselors are coming into classrooms now to talk about coping skills and mindfulness and relaxation and bullying and these types of things. Children are talking more. They're more aware of mental health stuff these days, for better or for worse. So let's capitalize a little bit on that. If you are in your mind concerned that your child may be experiencing some anxiety, depression, whatever it is, and you want to make sure that you're taking action on that, but you're afraid to, if I get them help, does that mean things are that bad, or does it mean that I've let it get too bad and I haven't dealt with it? Is this something I should deal with? And I think that moving from that very binary thinking of like it's either that bad or we're not there yet, to more of a, how can I wrap this kid in support? Like, how can I give them everything that we need, everything that they need to thrive? How can I give my child what they need to thrive? Moving from that binary thinking, is it that bad, to how can I give my child what it is that they need, can really help you take a deep breath and relax into this thing, kind of lean into listening, lean into providing support, and eventually making that call. So if kids are more aware of, if they're talking more, if they're posting more about mental health, let's work with that, right? So I see that you're going through some things. Here's what I observe. I want to keep talking about it, but do you feel like you need some help? Do you feel like you need some support outside of me or dad or us? Do you want somebody to talk to? Because again, I will throw everything I've got at helping you feel like you have what you need. I want you to feel supported. And then being able to explain to them, if they want to know, what is therapy, is it just going to be some weird person asking me intrusive questions? That we can talk about it. If you're anxious or depressed, they're probably going to do some talk therapy with you and kind of get to the bottom of how the way that you behave and interact in your life is connected to some of your worries or thoughts. They're going to talk you through some of what you're going through because they don't want you to suffer, and they're trained to help you not suffer as much. I'm going to get you in front of somebody who can help us all feel a little bit lighter, a little bit better.
Yeah, and give you tools like that little tomorrow box and things like that that we've already been graced with today, but specific to your situation, right? And your age range as that might be. So thank you so much. And folks who are thinking, well, my kid isn't talking about mental health, I'm going to tell you thousands of them are. Of those 8,000 screenings in just the first quarter, so that's January, February, and March of this year, over 7,000 of them were taken by kids under 18. So they're coming to our screenings. They're talking about mental health. They're thinking about it, and we know that actually the Pediatric Association has started a mental health initiative to kind of understand better where our youth are right now, because the world they're living in is very different than ours. It's very different than
Yes.
any of ours growing up, no matter how old we are as parents.
And
Yeah.
I think that it's your hope that it's never going to be your child, but it may very well be somebody in your child's immediate circle of friends who's going through something or who's exposing your child to, mental health issues or what they're going through or self-injury or any, one of the host of mental health issues that adolescents might face. But have that conversation with your child where if so and so is going through something, your child may bring that to you, maybe because they're strictly concerned about their friend. Maybe it's a safe proxy for talking about your child's own mental health stuff, but be open to the conversation where immediately we don't go into fix it mode, but we listen, talk about the relative impacts on your child, on that child, what they're worried about, and talk about ways that we can help.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We are wrapping up. I think we're coming up to an hour. I can't believe it. It's been such a wonderful time. We did share a couple of resources from MHA in the chat. 988 in Kentucky has its own website. So if you want to learn more about 988 or want to grab some social media images or get some magnets and pamphlets and things, it's 988.ky.gov for that. And our screenings are free. They're online every day at mhascreening.org. I've given you our personal link here as well. Just tells them it came from me. And then MHA, we actually have a back to school program where we always put out youth mental health information. It's always out after Kentuckians are back in school already. So it's usually coming out about the first week of September. But I did link to some of our old ones just so folks can have them. There's things on grief, on social media use, very hot topics last year and this year. So definitely feel free to take a look at those, folks. I know the Psychological Foundation has some other resources as well we'll be dumping in here. So, and we'll make sure that's shared with any registrants. We're going to send you the recording. But again, thank you, Dr. Buehner, so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for having me.